service, right? So the moment we begin to channelize our energy into devotional service or linking with the Supreme Lord, there is a chance that this life will be our final life in this material world. And when we leave this material world, we do not have to come back into this very painful material world. Okay? So we are all living entities. We are all spirit souls. We are living in this material world. And we are performing lots of activities under the jurisdiction of time. These activities, right? If they are activities which are for the benefit of others, right? And for the benefit of society as a whole, then they will produce positive karma for us. But if these activities are detrimental to ourselves, to society, then what's going to happen is these activities would result in reactions which will bring about, which would be negative for us, right? So we need to be careful about the activities which we engage in. Later on in the Bhagavad Gita, we will also learn that there are activities which will not just produce positive reaction. These activities will actually stop us from returning back into this material world. Okay? So that will be covered in today's class. And the fifth element is Ishvara. Right? Despite us living in this material world, etc., we actually belong to the spiritual world with God. So in case any one of your friends ask you, what did you learn in the Bhagavad Gita classes? Just remember these 5 elements. Living entities, the material world, the activities which we conduct under the jurisdiction of time, and finally, we belong to the spiritual world with the Supreme God. Okay. So we also went through quite a number of lessons last week. I'll just go through the most pertinent one, right? So first and foremost, we kicked off the Bhagavad Gita classes by looking at who we actually are. We are not this material body. We are a spirit soul. It will take a lot of time for us to finally realize that actually I'm not the material body. I'm just a spirit soul. In this life, I've got the body of a human. I'm not sure, what was the body I had previously. And I'm also not sure about the body I would have after this present life, right? So we are a spirit soul. We are not this body. Essentially, we are Atma, right? And this Atma is eternal in nature. How big is the Atma? It is 1/10,000th the tip of the hair. It is so small, but it is providing consciousness to the entire body. Right? That is the Atma. At the time of death, what happens is this Atma can actually leave the body through one of the holes in our body. All right. If we are very advanced in yoga, then there is a chance that it might leave from the top of our head, right? Or through our eyes, our nostril, our mouth. But if we have been orchestrating our life in an extensively material way, then the spirit soul may even leave from, from our anus, etc. Right? So, and that's the reason why sometimes, when someone leaves the body, when someone passes away, the doctors will tell you we need to clean the body up because the body is the soul is in a state of shock, right? And therefore the soul leaves through the other aperture, right? So we covered all of this in our past life, and Krishna is explaining to Arjuna, you do not want to get into this war. You do not want to fight this war, right? Because you are approaching this from a bodily concept. So Krishna is trying to explain to him this whole philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita. And Krishna is telling Arjuna that there was never a time when you did not exist, and there will also never be a time when you will not exist in the future. Right? So it's hard for us to actually conceptualize this. There was never a time when I did not exist, and in future there will also never be a time when I do not exist. Right? Because we are looking at things from a very material perspective. So Krishna is telling Arjuna that you and I, right, we have all been around since time immemorial, and we will continue to be around in time immemorial, right? I'm totally spiritual. Krishna is totally spiritual. But for the rest of us, we are material in our nature. The entire body is material, but we contain a spiritual soul, which is the only spiritual spark in the body, right? And this spiritual spark will just reincarnate from one body to another. It just moves on from one body to another, right? And there are reasons, why a spirit soul goes into a human body, why a spirit soul goes into the body of someone who is born with a diamond-studded spoon, or someone who is born in a aristocratic family, right? So all of this is explained very, very nicely, very, very succinctly in the Bhagavad Gita. So we covered some parts of that last week, right? So if we do not know the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, then it is exactly like this analogy. This lady over here, she bought a parrot and she bought a cage. The parrot is within the cage. What she does day and night is she polishes the cage, right? But she forgot to feed the bird. And that's exactly what we are always doing. We are just so bothered about the external cage, our material body, right? We decorate it, we perfume it, right? We do whatever is required to provide ourselves with the external view which we are craving for, but we forget about feeding the soul, right? We forget about feeding the soul. The soul can be fed only through spiritual activities. Like, for example, reading the Bhagavad Gita, reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, being in the association of like-minded devotees, singing kirtan, singing the glories of the Supreme Lord, right? So all of this nourishes our soul. What we also learned in last week's class was that we are not alone, right? Since time immemorial, the Supreme Lord has also expanded himself as Paramatma in our hearts. So we have our individual soul and we have Paramatma as the Supreme Soul, right? It's just like two birds, right? Two birds on a branch. One bird is eating the cherries, enjoying, right? And the other bird, which is Paramatma, is just watching us. Just watching and watching and watching. The moment we begin to see the Supreme Lord, the moment we begin to take instructions from the Supreme Lord, then you will see that the Lord begins to reciprocate, right? You will see that, wow, the Lord is actually answering our prayers, right? The Lord is orchestrating our lives, right? So, since time immemorial, we have forgotten, right? We have forgotten our eternal Father. He's there as Paramatma in our hearts. In fact, the scripture, Srimad Bhagavatam, explains he's with four hands, right? He's sitting or standing on a whole of like a lotus, right? He's got his golden helmet, etc., with four hands. He's the size of a thumb. Sometimes the scriptures explain he's the size of the palm, all right? He's spiritual in nature, and therefore he's just, circulating around the heart region, We cannot really explain where, because you cannot put a X, Y, and Z coordinate to the Supreme Lord. He's spiritual. This is a material body. Right? So one key lesson for us to remember is the Lord is in our heart. He has very, very kindly expended himself as Paramatma in all our hearts. The Lord is also there in the heart of every animal, right? In fact, the Lord is there in every atom. Okay? Later on, we will learn that, the name of the Lord, another name given to the Lord as Paramatma is Chirodakshai Vishnu. So we covered all of this last week. And we also learned that the Supreme Lord, right? Some Sampradayas, you call him Vishnu, sometimes Ram, sometimes Krishna, sometimes Nrsimhadev, right? So the Supreme Lord can be seen in three different forms. Okay? He can be Bhagavan, or the absolute supreme form of the Lord, as a person, right? So Bhagwan, simply Bhagwan means he's full of all the opulences like wealth. Everything belongs to him, right? He's the most famous. He's the most beautiful. And he's the most knowledgeable, because every piece of knowledge comes from him. And he's the strongest, right? All the planets, the universes are all floating on his energy. And despite having all of these opulences like wealth, fame, beauty, the knowledge, the strength, he's totally renounced. Right? He's totally renounced. It's like a CEO who has given the powers to all the devatas. Okay? So that's the Bhagavan form. From the Bhagavan form, the energy which is emanating from his body, that is called the Brahman effulgence. Okay, so you have Bhagavan, then you have the Brahman effulgence, right? Some Sampradayas, they believe in the Brahman Shakti or the Brahma Jyoti. They do not, they accept the form of the Lord, but they feel that the energy emanating from the Lord is higher than the personal representation of the Lord. Okay. And then the third form of the Lord is Paramatma. He's a partial representation of Bhagavan, and he is expanded as Paramatma in everyone's heart. Okay, I'll take a pause if you have any questions.
Jai Shri Krishna, brother. This is Sister
Yes.
Lisa.
Hi, Lisa.
The nature of Brahman. What is the nature of Brahman
Okay,
according to the?
sure. So Brahman is the bright energy which is emanating from the Lord. So in some sampradayas, they feel that, or their understanding is that they just want to merge into this Brahman effulgence. Okay. After that, they want that liberation where they just merge into the energy of the Lord. In some sampradayas or in some lineages, their desire is they don't want to merge into this impersonal form of the Lord or the energy of the Lord. They want to, life after life, just keep on serving the Supreme Lord. Because they feel that, okay, if we merge into the Brahman effulgence, into the brightness, and then what do we do? Right? What do we do? Right? Because we are spirit souls. Spirit souls are active. What do you do then? And therefore, the bhaktas, they don't even want liberation like this. All they are praying is, oh Lord, lifetime after lifetime, let me become a servant of you. Even if I'm born into this material body, into this material world, let me have that opportunity to always serve you. That is the desire of a bhakta. All right. But if the Lord so desires, if he wants me to serve him in the spiritual world, I will also accept that. You see? So, and then if you look at the yogis who are in deep meditation, who are they meditating on? Right? So sometimes they meditate on the Paramatma in their hearts. Okay? So it depends on which parampara we are in. Right? So that's why Sanatan Dharma is so inclusive. We don't say that this is correct, that is wrong, etc. We accept all the various parts. In fact, this Abrahamic religions, right? We feel, Sanatan Dharma explains that they are all path to the final absolute truth. They are all progressions. They are all progressions to the final absolute truth. Okay. So in Sanatan Dharma, we never belittle any religion. Right? Take it a step further. Because we are all spirit souls. We are not the body. So then we don't even distinguish ourselves as Caucasians, Chinese, etc. We are all spirit souls. We are all sisters and brothers. Lisa Mataji, is it all right?
Yes, brother. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Right. So then we spoke about the soul, right? The soul, as I explained, is 1/10,000, the tip of the hair. It's that small. And it's providing the entire consciousness to the body. The soul is totally spiritual. As Krishna explained, it's Sat Chit Ananda. Sat meaning it's eternal. Never a time it did not exist. It's Chit meaning it has got full consciousness, full knowledge. And it is Ananda, which is it's always blissful. But why is it that we as humans, we are never in bliss? There's just so much going on in our lives. We are like, pulled here, pulled there. We are disturbed in our minds. Today, mental wellness is a big, big, big issue. But we are spirit soul. We are supposed to be Satchit Ananda. Why are we not feeling that bliss? Why are we not having that full consciousness? It is because of eons and lifetimes of, consciousness, which is blocking this soul from realizing its essence. Right? Lifetimes of impressions which we have been covering the soul with. Right? So what do we need to do? Just imagine you have a diamond, right? A diamond which has just been mined, it's a rock. But then you have lots of mud around it. You will have to remove the mud. You will have to polish that rock. And finally, it will look like it has got, hundreds of carats. It's a 100-carat diamond, right? So the entire process is exactly similar to what we need to do. Lifetime after lifetime, we have gone through so much of conditioning. When we start reading the scriptures, when we begin to meditate on the Supreme Lord, when we begin to sing the glories of the Lord through bhajans, when we sing Hari Katha, right? When we do kirtan, when we do spiritual activities, then these layers of mud will slowly disintegrate and live, right? They will just be broken away. And then you will realize that, wow, my consciousness is becoming very clear. I can make the right decisions. I know what is correct, what is right, and what is not. What is not for the betterment of my soul, right? In the Bhagavatam, it's explained that Paramatma, who is seated next to our soul, he is operating a washing machine or a dishwasher. The moment the Paramatma is activated through our prayers to him, through kirtan, etc., then what the Lord does is, he, like a washing machine, he removes all of this dirt. lifetime and lifetime of this dirt can be removed when we engage in spiritual activities. Okay. So that's the soul, that's the Paramatma. Apart from that, we also have this subtle body. We have our material body, we have the spiritual body, which is the soul, and we have the subtle body, which is, in between spiritual and material. The subtle body can be broken down into three parts: the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. All right. What is the mind? The mind is just a repository of all the impressions, right? And the mind is like a monkey. It will keep on dictating to us. Do this, do that. Don't listen, right? The intelligence is the discerning power. Essentially, what the intelligence does is, the intelligence, if it's sharp, it can tell the mind to behave. It can direct the mind to do the right things. But if our intelligence is not sharp, if our intelligence is not spiritualized, then the mind will control us. If the intelligence is spiritualized through our sadhana, waking up for Mangal Arati, reading the scriptures, doing bhajan, being in the association of like-minded devotees, our intelligence will become so spiritualized, and you will realize that, wow, stuff which I could not control before, I can now control it, right? So this is the subtle science. In the best of PhD programs, BSc programs, master's programs, they don't teach this, but this is all explained so succinctly in our scriptures. The third element of the subtle body is the false ego. The false ego is what is always cheating us to think that we are this material body and not the spirit soul. Okay? The false ego, right? How can this person do this to me? How can my child speak to me like this, right? How can my spouse do this to me, right? We are still all at that material level, right? The moment we begin to realize that actually I'm just a spirit soul, this body is given to me by the Supreme Lord, then you will realize that our consciousness will just keep on changing. And finally, we have the gross body, or the material body. It's made of earth, water, fire, and ether. Ether is space. Okay. Right. We covered all of this, right? So maybe, I think many of you, including Lisa Mataji, she was teaching, so she could not be there last week. So how many souls do we have? We have an individual soul, and we have our Paramatma. The size of the soul is 10,000th the tip of the hair. Where is the soul? All right, it's spiritual in nature, so it's probably around the heart. Sometimes they say it's around the head. It's fine. Right? When you do gardening, you will realize that sometimes, we accidentally cut an earthworm, and it still continues to wriggle around and live like two different earthworms. But the soul cannot be cut into two pieces. So then how did one earthworm, which was cut into two, begin to live continuously? Right? We learned in last week's class that actually what happens is, there are millions of souls around us. They are just waiting for a body. Right? They are just waiting for a body. If the consciousness surrounding the soul at the time of its departure from the body, from this previous body, if that consciousness was such that it was befitting the body of an earthworm, then that soul will actually move into that earthworm. Okay. Similarly, the child who is born to a woman, all right, it is always a specially selected soul, right? Depending on the consciousness of the parents at the time of conceiving the child. right? So all of this is explained in the scriptures so succinctly. Right? Krishna will explain later on in chapter number 8 that whatever consciousness we are in at the time of our death, that consciousness will be carried, right, to by the subtle body and the soul to that next body. Right? So we have to be very, very careful. Whatever consciousness we have at our time of death, actually, the scriptures also explain at the time of death, however we have been living, it just rolls through our mind like a videotape, right? And then it gives you that final output. This is the consciousness. But you know, one of our students, she works in healthcare, and geriatric, is it? I can't remember the field, old age, etc. You'll realize that sometimes when, towards the end of life, people get into a coma, they may be unconscious. Then what is the consciousness at that time? You may have a great devotee of the Lord. At the end, what happens is this person just gets into a coma. Then, does it mean that the entire life, all the activities, the entire orchestration towards spiritual life is all wasted? No. The scriptures explain very clearly that even if we cannot remember the Supreme Lord at the time of death, the Lord will keep his promise, because the Lord is indebted to us. The Lord will come and bring us back to his spiritual kingdom. Okay, that's a promise in the Varuna, in the not Varuna Purana, Varaha Purana. It's explained. Okay, that if my devotee is unable to remember me at the time of death due to the bodily functions, then I will come and bring my devotee back. So is the soul the same in all humans? Yes. The same soul is there in every human, in fact, in every animal too. So what can the knowledge of the soul help us with? The moment we see that everyone is a spirit soul and everyone has Paramatma in his heart, then we will begin to stop differentiating. All of this racial conflicts, this ethnic wars, all of this, we'll begin to realize that what are we fighting for? We are all spirit souls. Okay. That is why our Sanatan Dharma philosophy is so it helps to solve all the current day's problems if we take the initiative of wanting to learn. But the problem is we are also engrossed in our daily lives, right? Looking after our kids, our jobs, school, etc. We do not have time, right? But the moment we take a clear intention in wanting to learn about the scriptures, right, then you will realize that all of this will begin to be revealed to us. Okay, then the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was saying that I will not fight the war. I'm going to run away, right? I will not be able to kill my family. But Krishna is telling him, no, you are a Kshatriya. You have your Swadharma, your responsibility to the society as a Kshatriya to uphold Dharma, right? So similarly, what Krishna is telling us that while we have our responsibility to our family, our friends, our society, right, wherein we have to do our duty, we do our duty to the best of our ability, but we will not be attached to the results. And we will also not be attached to not doing our duty. What does it mean that I will not be attached to the results? It simply means that, I'll just give my very, very best. Whether it's a success or not, no, I don't care about it. I just give my very, very best. I will leave no stone unturned. The final result is up to the Supreme Lord. Okay? That is the meaning of I'm not attached to the results. Okay? It's quite tough, especially if in today's corporate world. How do you manage this? Right? But there's sufficient research to actually prove that when we follow the procedures, when we do not leave any um, stone unturned, when we just do the best of our abilities and we are not attached to the results, our performance can be much better than someone who is so clinging on to success. So Krishna says, that's your swadharma. You have to do it. You cannot run away from the responsibility as a husband, as a corporate citizen, as a doctor, right? As a salesperson. That is your dharma. At the same time, you need to balance this with your Sanatan Dharma, which is remembering your ultimate goal. What is your relationship with God? Take out some time on a daily basis, right, to reconnect back with the Lord. That is what religion is all about. Religion, or religare in Greek, it's about reconnecting our forgotten constitutional position. Okay. So this is a very, very important verse from the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is saying, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself the cause of the results. Right? And therefore, for example, if something goes well, remember that you are not the only one who is responsible for these results. Okay? Essentially, what Krishna says is, we can desire for something, right? The Supreme Lord in our heart will have to sanction it. The sanctioning can happen, can be in response to our karma. Okay? And then material nature takes over on this sanctioning. Right? So for example, every day I pass by the beach side, I see these huge bungalows, and every day I'm meditating, oh, I want to live in one of these bungalows. I gave this example last week, right? I have that huge desire. But, if my karma, if my actions are not such that I'm entitled to this, then material nature will not provide this to me. Right? We are just 1/3 of the entire ecosystem of getting a desire fulfilled. We desire, the Lord will sanction. Material nature, under the jurisdiction of Goddess Durga, she will then orchestrate for it to happen. Okay. So that's why sometimes you can give the best of your ability, but something doesn't happen. But you know what? If you have faith in the Lord, in time to come, you will realize that it was good it did not happen. Yeah? There's this saying by Saint Teresa of not the current the Saint Teresa of Calcutta, but Saint Teresa of I can't remember. So she said that more tears were shed for prayers which were answered than prayers which were not answered. Sometimes we just ask and demand something from the Lord, and then we realize that actually, I should have just allowed the Lord to provide what he felt was best for me. Right? When we demand for something and the Lord, like a great father, will say, okay, you want this, right? I'll just give it to you. And then we realize that actually, no, it's not for my good. Right? So, yeah, Saint Teresa of Avila, she said that more tears were shed for prayers which were answered than prayers which were not answered. Okay. Sometimes in a prayer which is not answered, it is not answered in our perception, in our view, but the Lord has better, um, better arrangements for us. Okay, so right, I think we stopped around here. What is the goal of life? My swadharma, my duties, and my sanatan dharma. Right, I need to balance it nicely. And my ultimate goal of life is to orchestrate my activities such that I can remember the Lord. Right? I need to connect my life to the Lord. I need to connect my activities so that I can remember the Lord as much as I can. So, the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also explains that we may start our spiritual life, but sometimes the material nature is very, very strong, right? I may chant the Lord's name today, tomorrow, because, of the association with my friends, I may just lose interest in kirtan or chanting the names of the Lord. But Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that don't worry, O Arjuna. In this endeavor, whatever you have done to reconnect back yourself to the spiritual world, whatever you have done to reconnect with the Supreme Lord, it is never a loss, right? There's never a loss or diminution. A little bit of advancement on this path can actually protect us from the most dangerous type of fear. Krishna is saying that if you have started this spiritual path, at least you will be born as a human in the next life. And wherever you have stopped, you will continue from there. That's the best investment, isn't it? Right? And that's the reason why sometimes you will see, how is it that our children, they take up to spirituality so easily compared to ourselves? Because they are continuing from where they have stopped, right? Where they have stopped might be way, way, way more than what we are doing today. So always remember, this is the material world. Difficulties will always be there. We are like a fish out of water, right? Our spiritual nature, our constitutional position is we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. We are a servant of the Supreme Lord. The moment we begin to enjoy independently from the Lord, we will feel that we are a fish out of water, right? Lots of miseries in the material world. Material world, you have miseries from nature, Adi Daivika. You have miseries from other beings, difficult bosses, difficult relatives, enemies, etc. Adi Bautik, right? And finally, the miseries from our body and mind, birth, death, old age, and disease. These are all really painful, right? So Krishna is saying that in this material world, birth and death will continue to take place. We need to come out of this. We being in Singapore, we may feel that, wow, actually life is not that bad. No, why are you being so negative about it? It's not that bad. Yeah, it's not that bad today. But look at other people in different parts of the world. If we are somehow born in those scenarios in future, then, isn't it? It's because of our good karma. If we orchestrate our lives in such a way where, we are not investing in good karma, then, okay. But Krishna says that once you realize that you are a spirit soul, once you have spiritualized your intelligence and you are able to control your mind, it will reach a certain stage where you will begin to accept these miseries of nature, miseries of other human beings and animals, miseries brought about by our body and mind, because this is expected, right? And we will begin to say that, yes, this is the material world. This is expected, right? We will not be disturbed by this. In fact, M. Scott Peck, in the book, The Road Less Traveled, he says that life is difficult. It's a great truth, one of the greatest truth. But the moment we begin to accept this, then life is actually no longer difficult, because once it's accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. Okay, so that's the material world. Okay, so that was the quick recap. Let me see. Wow, I've taken 50 minutes to recap. Any questions from last week's class? Lisa Masterji, does it make sense now? Sorry, you are driving. Don't answer. You just focus on the road, please.
Okay.
Don't answer. All right, so that's last week's class. Now let's continue with today's class, okay? Do you see the full screen, Lavanya? Anu, do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, so today's class, right? Yeah, it's going to take some time, and therefore, I think I'll go beyond 3 lessons, maybe 4 or 5 lessons to cover the whole Bhagavad Gita. So last week we also learned about the chariot analogy, right? So if you look at the chariot, right, there are horses which are pulling the chariot, right? And these horses are actually controlled by the reins which are pulled by the chariot driver. And the soul is like the chariot rider. If the chariot driver, which is the intelligence, if the intelligence is spiritualized sufficiently, then it can control the horses. Right? It can control the horses because it could control the mind. Right? So the reins are represented by the mind. Once we have spiritualized our intelligence, then we can actually spiritualize our mind and control our mind. Once the mind is controlled, then the senses will not run away. Right? This is what yoga is. Essentially, it is about controlling our mind. It's about linking our mind, our senses to the Supreme Lord. Okay? So this is the amazing analogy explained in the scriptures about the soul, the mind, the intelligence, and the senses, and the material body. Right? We can only control our mind if we have sharpened our intelligence. How do you go about sharpening your intelligence or spiritualizing your intelligence? Anu?
Yeah.
Not yeah. No. How do you spiritualize your intelligence? I
think by doing more of Sanatan Dharma.
Okay. For example, what kind of activities?
Like first putting your food for the god before you preparing the food for the god. Yeah, that's the best example that I remember.
All right. It can be as simple as, waking up in the morning for Mangal Arati, right? Doing Arati for the Lord, singing a kirtan or a bhajan, right? Chanting the Lord's name. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, amongst all sacrifices, I'm japa, right? Which is the chanting of the Lord's name is so powerful because the Lord is non-different from his name, right? And that's the reason why, all the devotees, they keep on singing kirtan, they keep on singing bhajan, they chant mantras, etc. So that's all to spiritualize the mind, the intelligence, and therefore the mind can also then be controlled. All right, so now we move on to the next lesson, lesson number 7. Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that we have to offer all our results, okay, in the service of God. knowing him to be the ultimate enjoyer and controller, right? That is real renunciation. I know it might sound, wow, this is so difficult. I'm working so hard. How can I, give my entire salary to the Lord? I've got my family to look after, my old age. I have to pay for my house, etc. It's not as complex as what we make it to be. What Krishna is saying is that whatever duties we are doing, dovetail this to spirituality. Okay? From our work, if it's responsible, right? If it's responsible work, right? Right? If we are not causing harm to others, right? It's not breaking any of the regulatory processes. Then whatever work which we are doing, the results would be like remuneration, our salary, right? Give some parts of that to the temple. Give some part of that for the propagation of Sanatan Dharma, right? Use some part of that for charity, right? Whatever skills which we have, we need to remember that these skills are actually coming from the Lord. Whatever talent which we have, whatever knowledge, influence which we have, use this for propagating, Sanatan Dharma. Use this in the service of Lord. That is what Krishna is saying. Okay. So now, even our children, right? Even our children, they are gifts of God. When you serve them, you are also serving the children of God, right? That's very important for us to remember, right? Some of you are teaching the children in the Bal Vikas classes. Essentially, what are you doing? You are using your skills, your talent, your knowledge, your influence in the service of them, in the service of God. That's great. Right? Recently, I gave a class where I was using the analogy of a harmonium. When you play the harmonium, and if you, produce some amazing ragas music, does anyone go to the harmonium and congratulate the harmonium and tell the harmonium, wow, you have done a great job? No. They go to the player of the harmonium. Similarly, we are all instruments of the Lord, right? The Lord has given us this blessing, this skill, the talent. Just like we do not glorify the harmonium, why should we glorify ourselves? We should glorify the person who has given us this skill. Just like you do not glorify the human, you do not glorify the harmonium, but you glorify the player, right? Because he is investing that energy in the harmonium. Similarly, the Lord has invested his energy in us. He is the source of all the talent, the skills, and therefore he should be glorified, not us. So, glory is given to the source, not to the instrument. I pray that God would teach me to give him all the glory for what he has done in me and through me. That he would teach me to not seek glory for myself, but only for him. All right. Once we reach that consciousness, then you can say that, wow, I have made some progress in my spiritual life. Okay. Any questions on this? Right? If we don't do this, then we are a miser.
Just now you mentioned so they praise the source and not the instrument, right? Which is they praise the player, not the instrument.
Yeah.
But then here, God is not the instrument, right? It is us who is the instrument. So a bit confusing on this analogy.
So we are the instrument, and therefore you should praise the Lord. We are all like puppets, right? We are all like puppets. The Lord is orchestrating everything,
Mm.
right?
Oh,
I'm playing the harmonium, right? I get the glory, not the instrument. The harmonium doesn't got the glory. Similarly, the Lord is the master orchestrator. He's the one who gives us all of these skills. And therefore, we who are the instrument, we should not be the one glorified. The Lord should be the one glorified because He is giving that source of energy to all of us.
okay, understood. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So now Krishna is now beginning to say that we are still in chapter number 2, another 16 more chapters. Right? But we have learned so much already. Krishna is saying, O Dhananjaya or O Arjuna, get rid of all your fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to that consciousness. So Krishna is saying that, don't just engage in material activities, dovetail them to God consciousness, right? So when we are serving our children, our consciousness is God has given us these children. We are serving the Lord's children. Okay? When we are cooking, we are not cooking it for our taste buds. We are cooking it as an offering to the Lord. Right? When we are doing our work, yes, we are doing our duties, our responsibilities, etc., so that we can maintain ourselves, we can maintain our family. And maintenance also simply means bringing our family and ourselves into the Lord's service. Whatever remuneration I get, maybe a small percentage of that, or depending on yourself, you use it in devotional service. Simple things like even buying agarbatti, doing an archana, all of these are spiritual activities. So now Krishna is beginning to explain a little bit more about karma. A man or a woman engaged in devotional service or bhakti gets rid himself or herself of both good and bad action, even in this life. This is a little bit hard for a newcomer to understand. Okay? Let me explain this very simply. What Krishna is saying is that if you are, a philanthropist, right? Very, very rich, you build hospitals, set up clinics, right? You do a lot of charitable activities. But if these activities are somehow not dovetail as a service to Lord, if the consciousness we are bringing into it is, I'm doing this, instead of, this is all the Lord's, I'm just using His giving in His service. See, so small change of consciousness, a slight change of consciousness can convert that into, from a great or a good karmic activity into a spiritual activity. Okay? When you do a good karmic activity, then what the Lord does is, you will be rewarded with the fruits of your action. But the moment that good activity is connected to the spiritual, to the Supreme Lord, if that is somehow connected as a service to the Lord, then that is no longer a regular good activity. It is a spiritual activity. Okay. Now let's analyze what's the difference between a spiritual activity and a good karmic activity. A good karmic activity will bring about very nice positive actions for us, which means that, wow, I'll be blessed with a lot more good things. Maybe next life I'll be born in a very rich family, or even in this life I may get something which is superior in nature. But as we do more and more of these good karmic activities, it will reach a stage where we will begin to realize that, wow, by doing these good karmic activities, I have to come back into this material world to enjoy the results of these activities. Right? After this life, for example, the Ambanis they are very, very rich. At the same time, they are spending a lot of money on spiritual, on good activities, building hospitals, blah, 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 blah. Then what is going to happen is they will have to come back to enjoy that fruits again and again and again. Right? But if all of that is somehow dovetailed as a service to the Lord, then we are getting rid of even the good results. Then we don't have to come back into this material world anymore. The Lord will take care of us because we have sacrificed this for His pleasure. It is no longer a good karmic activity, but it is a spiritual activity. Take another example, right? I'm cooking food for the family, right? Nice vegetarian food without onion, without garlic, all right, in accordance to Vedic principles, right? I feed this food to 100 paupers on the street. That's a wonderful activity. Wonderful activity. All you need to uplift it is, before you feed them, offer this as a service to Krishna. Offer this as bhog to the Supreme Lord. Once the Lord accepts this, then this food becomes prasad. This prasad, once you offer to these people, then it is not just regular service. You are also uplifting the consciousness of all of these people. Your good karmic activity is now upgraded to a solid spiritual activity. That solid spiritual activity will not give you positive karmic points, but will open the gates to the spiritual world. And therefore, by engaging in devotional service to the Lord, all that you eat, all that you do, all that you give in charity, do it as a service to the Supreme Lord. Do it as a service to Krishna, Rama, or Vishnu. All right. Once you do this, then you are getting rid of all that positive or negative reaction. And in this way, we become free from the cycle of birth and death. Okay. And we attain the state beyond all of these miseries. We do not have to come back into this material world anymore. Okay, I'm going to take a stop over here to see, is it making sense? Is this Greek? Is it hard to understand? Vidu?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, Madhuri Mataji?
Yeah, it's good.
All right. Dr. Ravi? Okay, no problem. All
No,
right.
no, I'm here.
Yeah.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right. So it's like, it's a paradigm shift from how we have been brought up. It's a real paradigm shift, and therefore it's not tough to understand what the Bhagavad Gita, our scriptures, are explaining. Okay, do you see the full screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So earlier on, we explained about the soul. Then we have the subtle body. The subtle body consists of the intelligence, the mind, the false ego, and then we have our material body. So, when we speak to our elders, they will tell us that we need to control our senses. Okay, the senses moving in all direction. I want this, right? It's hard to control our senses, be it the sense of seeing, the sense of tasting, etc. It's very hard. Sense of touching, it's very, very hard to control, right? So we can, artificially control the senses by suppressing it. Just imagine, I'm hooked to smoking for a long, 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 long time. I'm hooked to drinking liquor. On a daily basis, I drink, maybe half a liter of wine, or whatever you call that, 2 glasses of wine or 3 glasses of wine on a daily basis. I'm addicted to it. Today, I make a conscious effort. I'm not going to smoke. I'm not going to drink anymore. All right. I suppress it. Is it going to be possible? It's going to be really tough. The Bhagavad Gita explains that to suppress these lower impulses, we need something which is a higher taste. All right. Because otherwise, it's like creating a vacuum in our life. When we create a vacuum, when we remove something, then we need to put something to replace that vacuum. No. Otherwise, what's going to happen? Nature abhors or nature hates a vacuum. We will immediately go back to our earlier habits of smoking and drinking. So Krishna is explaining that to control the senses, right, we need engagements which are providing us with a higher taste. Right? This higher taste comes from spiritual activities. So Krishna says in 2.59, chapter 2, text number 59, we are embodied souls, meaning that we have a soul and we have a body around that soul. Embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, but the taste for the sense objects will remain. But seizing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness via devotional service. Right? So, for example, if I'm a meat eater, and the moment I begin to realize that actually there are lots of nice vegetarian dishes, if offered to the Lord, gives me a higher consciousness, then slowly I will lose taste for meat. That's exactly what happened to me, right? At the age of 18, 17, I was invited to the Hare Krishna feast. I went there once, I went there twice, and I told my mother, I'm not going to be eating that fish and the chicken which is there in the fridge anymore. I lost taste for it because there was a higher taste I got. Right? And then you begin to realize that why am I killing a poor animal? When the poor animal is killed, can you imagine that influx of what do you call that? I don't know, toxins into that body of that animal while it's like, trying to escape from it, right? So once we get a higher taste for nice vegetarian prasad, then we will lose the interest to have non-vegetarian food. Sometimes some students will ask me, why can we not offer meat to the Supreme Lord? Right? The Lord doesn't ask for meat. The Lord only asks for patram pushpam phalam toyam. Right? A leaf, water, a flower. But the most important ingredient is the devotion which comes with it. All right. When we offer something which is like a meat, etc., is that devotion? No. We killed something, or we caused an animal to be killed before we can actually offer it. And therefore, why should the Lord accept this? Okay. The Lord is not hungry for our vegetarian food. The Lord is hungry for that devotion. Okay. All right. So let's do a time check. We have 15 more minutes, 16 more minutes. Now we move on to lesson number 10. Okay. This is essentially from the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Queen Kunti, the mother of Pandavas, after the war is over, she's telling Krishna, you please don't go. Right? You have been saving us from all these difficulties. Right? When my daughter-in-law was disrobed, was going to be disrobed, you saved her. Right? You saved my children from the war, the Mahabharat war. Right? My son Bhima was going to be eaten up by the cannibals. You saved him. My son was poisoned by my brother-in-law and his children. Right? You saved him. And a house was constructed by my brother-in-law, which was made of lacquer, so that he could burn the house up. Right? And you orchestrated such that we leave that place. Like this, you have been saving us every time, O Supreme Lord. Please don't leave. And in this amazingly celebrated prayers of Queen Kunti, by the way, in week number 5 or week number 6, we will go through the prayers. So please continue to be in the classes. We will go through this Srimad Bhagavatam part. One important prayer which she makes is, she says that, my Lord, you can be easily approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great riches, opulences, high education, bodily beauty, they cannot approach you with sincere feeling. She's explaining this. Oh Lord, you can only be approached by materially exhausted, not by someone who is, just hungry for more progress, hungry for more opulence, hungry for bodily beauty. No. Right? So this is something for us to really meditate on. How are we orchestrating our life? Are we just hungry for more and more material? Because if we are hungry for more and more material, it is going to be really difficult for us to approach the Supreme Lord with sincerity. Right? Now my question to you is there anything wrong in being rich? Mahesh Prabhu, what do you think? Is there anything wrong in being rich? Queen Kunti is saying that you can only be rich by the materially exhausted. So then how rich? Somehow I've got a windfall, Krishna has given me all this wealth. What do you think, Ravi Prabhu?
Actually, no, it doesn't mean you can't be rich. It just means that you're not craving for those things even more. If you have it, you have it, but you must be, humble and content with everything you have, and then you'll be able to pursue these
Exactly.
pursuits.
Exactly. Right? So you are very, very grateful to the Lord, Oh my Lord, you have provided me with all of these opulences, these riches, etc. Right? Nothing happens without your mercy. I'm so grateful to you. Right? That's number one. And number two is, I'm materially exhausted. That means I'm not attached to this. I'm not attached to my position as the CEO. I'm not attached to this wealth which I have, because I know if the Lord can provide it to me, the Lord can also take it away from me. All right. So materially exhausted simply means that I have this, but I'm not craving for more. I'm not so attached to it. That's the meaning of materially exhausted, right? One may be a very beautiful person, a very pretty lady. Nothing wrong with that, right? But she doesn't have that pride. I'm Miss Universe or I'm Miss Aishwarya or whatever. No. All right. Whatever wealth this person has, this person uses also in the service of the Lord. Whatever talent this person has, whatever is given, right? They are materially exhausted. They know that this is just a gift by the Lord. Let me use this gift in the service of the Lord. All right. If we have that mindset, then we can approach the Lord. Okay. So if you're looking for secret sauce on how to become a spiritual person, very important is we need to be materially exhausted. It's not easy. It will take time, right? It will take time. And sometimes, it's interesting that I like this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You know that pyramid? It starts with, oh, I need shelter, right? I need health and all that. And finally, it comes to self-actualization. And there's a lot of truth in this Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? If I'm impoverished, if I'm like, struggling, then I'm like, I'm struggling with my material. I'm struggling with my material life. It becomes very difficult to actually approach the Lord. It becomes very difficult, right? But if the Lord has blessed us with a comfortable life, right, then it's important for us to express gratitude to the Lord and use this comfort in the service of the Lord. That's where the final top tier of self-actualization actually materializes. Okay. Let's see. Let's continue. Let's see if we can make another 1 or 2 more lessons. We've already learned 5 lessons. That's great. Okay. So now, lesson number 11 is there are many types of yoga. Okay. In today's world, all these yoga centers being set up left, right, and center, also getting bankrupt left, right, and center. So that's a wrong meaning of yoga. Yoga means to reconnect to our source. And this reconnecting to our source can happen through a number of ways. Right? It could be through bhakti, which is devotional service. Bhakti yoga or devotional service to the Lord. It could be through jnana yoga, which is reading the scriptures, right? Getting into philosophical speculation. It could be through dhyana yoga, which is meditation. All right. Later we will learn that in this whole process of dhyana yoga, there are many, many, many processes. There are many steps. Right? There are many, many steps where first and foremost, you need to know what to do, yama and niyama, right? And then finally, you will come to the absorption of the Supreme Lord in the heart, right? It's a 9-stage process. That's dhyana yoga. But Krishna is explaining, apart from this bhakti yoga, dhyana yoga, jnana yoga, there's also karma yoga. Essentially, what karma yoga is, it is you do your duties to the best of your abilities, do not be attached to it, and you use your skills, your remuneration, your wealth in the service of the Supreme Lord. That is karma yoga. You do your karma, your activities, and at the same time, you are connecting back. Most of you would be karma yogis, right? As parents, as responsible parents, where you are bringing your children for these classes. That's an amazing. It's so easy. On a Saturday, 5 to 7, peak time. Why do you want to bring them for this? It's because you have a clear intention in wanting to serve your children. That's the reason why you bring them for the classes, right? That is karma yoga. Right? As a good parent, you are connecting them to the Lord, right? You do all your responsibility and then you are connecting your results back to the Lord. Okay? Anuji, remember what are the 4 yogas I just discussed?
Dhyana yoga, jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, and karma yoga.
Wonderful. All right, good. Now let's look at Bhakti Yoga. What is Bhakti Yoga? Essentially, it is the easiest means to revive our dormant, inherent constitutional position. I told you earlier on that we are a spirit soul. There's Paramatma next to us. Our spirit soul is supposed to be Sat Chit Ananda. But due to lifetimes and lifetimes of conditioning, we cannot realize that spiritual nature, and therefore we are accustomed to seeing ourselves as the body. The more we engage in bhakti or devotional service, the more this mud around our soul will be removed. That is what bhakti yoga is. Essentially, whatever you do, whatever you eat, do it as a service to Krishna. Okay? There is the servitor, there is the served, and there is the service which you do to the Lord. There are 9 processes of devotional service, and it starts with hearing. Right? It just starts with hearing. And Krishna explains in the last verse of chapter number 6, that if you look at all the different types of yogas, amongst all yogis, the highest is my bhakta. Therefore, bhakti yoga is the highest of all the yogas. Okay? It's very simple to perform. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam. Whatever you offer me with devotion, be it water, a leaf, or a flower, if you offer it with devotion, I will accept it. But of course, all of you, you can afford much more than water, leaf, and flowers, right? Therefore, offer your activities. You dovetail all your activities in devotional service. And what happens is you naturally become materially exhausted. Right? When you offer it to the Lord, when you offer your home to the Lord, right? Then you will become materially exhausted. You will see your home as essentially a receptacle for bhakti. Right? You will see your children as a gift from the Lord. And my role, my responsibility is to make them into nice devotees. Right? I will see my job as, right, something which, helps me in my dharma. I'm doing an activity which is not causing difficulties to others. It is not against the 4 regulative principles of no meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sex, right? If my work, my responsibility is not engaging in any of this, then that remuneration which I get, the salary which I get, I can use it in the Lord's service. That is bhakti. Okay? And it can be attained through 2 ways. A gradual way, which I've just spoken, or sometimes it can be even direct. Right? Directly you begin to serve the Lord's deity, etc. Okay? So these are the 9 processes of devotional service. It begins with hearing the Bhagavad Gita, hearing the Kirtan, right? What you are doing is by hearing the Supreme Lord as Paramatma in our heart, He activates the process of cleaning the mud around our soul. The next one is from Shravanam comes Kirtanam, which is chanting the Lord's name, glorifying the Lord's name. Then Vishnu Smaranam, or remembering the Lord. When we have some time, we remember the Lord. Pada Sevanam, or serving the Lord's lotus feet. Very simple. You know, if you have a tulsi plant, if the tulsi is growing very nicely, you can pluck the tulsi leaves, right? After, taking permission from her, don't just go and pluck and eat. No, tulsi leaves need to be plucked after asking permission from her. And then that leaf is not to be eaten. It's supposed to be offered on the Lord's lotus feet, on the photographs or on the deity. Archanam is the deity worship where you do arti, right? And then Vandanam, where you can actually glorify the Lord using the prayers from the Srimad Bhagavatam or the Puranas, or you can even recite your own prayers. Dasyam, where you regard yourself as a servant of the Lord. This is the Lord's house. I'm just a caretaker. Right? This is the Lord's house. I'm just a caretaker. Sakhyam. Sometimes, right? The relationship is not just as a dasyam. We can engage in a friendship relationship with the Lord. Okay? Sometimes when you go to Vrindavan, you will also see that, some old Matajis, they will carry a small Laddu Gopal. They will be feeding him. It's like a Vatsalya Ras, like how Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj used to treat Krishna. Okay, that's Sakhyam. And then finally, it's Atma Nivedanam, or the complete surrender, right? Where I use my hands, right? I do my work in the office, etc. That remuneration I use in the Lord's service. I use my hand in decorating the Lord's deity or the Lord's photograph. I use my hand in cleaning the Lord's home, the Lord's temple, altar, right? I use my legs to walk to the temple, to walk to my altar area, right? I use my eyes to see the beautiful form of the Lord when I wake up in the morning. I use my ears in hearing about the Lord's katha, etc. Right? And I bow down my head to the Supreme Lord. If we don't bow down our head to the Supreme Lord, then we will have to bow down our head to material nature. We will be forced to bow down. Okay? So this is devotional service. It's a simple process. Parikshit Maharaj only had 9 days to live. And he said, I just want to hear all about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he heard about Krishna, he heard about Vishnu, he heard about Ram, he heard about the great devotees of the Supreme Lord who were offering prayers to the Supreme Lord. And that's something which we will cover in the remaining weeks. Sukadev Goswami was therefore explaining this Harikatha to Parikshit Maharaj. Okay. Prahlad Maharaj was chastised by his father, Hiranyakashipu. Hiranyakashipu was so angry with his son because the son kept on saying that you are not the greatest. Vishnu is the greatest. And therefore, what the father did was put him to be trampled by elephants, put him in a room which was full of serpents, right? Got his sister to hold him in a furnace, right? Threw him from the top of the cliff. But all of these activities could not stop. Prahlad was being protected, and none of these activities by his father could stop Prahlad from increasing his faith in Krishna, in Vishnu. And therefore, this Vishnu Smaranam, this remembering of the Lord, is also a devotional service. Sometimes, right, When we go to Vrindavan, you will see there will be some really poor sadhus, right? They cannot serve the Lord. They do not even have utensils. Forget about food. In their mind, right? They are remembering the Lord and they are cooking in their mind. And there's a story in the Puranas of a Brahmana, right? He could not he could not afford the ingredients to make a sweet pudding or a kheer or payasam for the Lord. And therefore, in his mind, he was cooking. Oh, I'm lighting the fire. I've got this pot. I'm putting the water, the milk, the rice, etc. Right? And then after that, while it was cooking, after cooking, he cooled it down. Right? Before he put the tulsi in it, he wanted to check whether was it cool. And therefore, in his mind, he was like placing his finger into the pot of kheer. And he woke up because he actually burnt his finger. All right, that's the efficacy of Vishnu Smaranam. Right? Krishna says that I can be worshipped in many forms. It can be in the form of the deity. Right? The deity can be made of metal, wood, paint, right? Paint. And also the deity can be made in the mind of the devotee. Okay. So these are the 9 processes of bhakti or devotional service. Very simple. Right? And you don't have to perfect all 9. Even focusing on one of these 9 processes can actually bring us back to the spiritual world. So with this, I will end today's class. It's 4:36. Any question? You're all very quiet. Gauri, Vaswani?
Yes.
Any question, Gauri ji?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
You're good? Okay, nice. Anita, Mahisan?
Yes.
Yes. Any question?
No,
All clear?
no question. Yes, thank you.
Very much. Lisa Mataji, I think you are still driving, so I won't disturb you.
No, I'm not driving. I parked my car.
Okay, good. All right, so we will meet next week. Yeah. And have a great week. And thank you very much. Please go through all the slides I will be sending you. I will also send the recording. Right. Madhuri Mataji, you have a question? Please tell me.
Yeah, like it's not that every time we indulge ourselves, like sometimes we like to do Shravanam, sometimes we like to do Kirtanam, right? Like if it is not wholeheartedly, like sometimes we may not feel like we sit and chant for 1 hour. I mean, how far it is correct? Because I believe that if I'm not doing something wholeheartedly, then it is there's no point doing that. Like every day, if I feel like doing arti, it's good. But sometimes if I don't feel like, then I don't think I should do it for the sake of doing it.
Okay. Nice way of looking at it. But another way of looking at it is, there's an English saying, fake it till you make it. Right? So even while we are, artificially doing it, or maybe that desire is only 10%, oh, I have to do this, never mind, just do it. Because the process of just doing it will purify us. By doing it again and again and again, if the Lord so desires, that interest will come wholeheartedly in our hearts. A lot of us have actually experienced this, right? My wife will wake up for Mangal Arati and then, just not to upset her, I will also wake up and do, I'll just help her. And now it has become like a habit, right? Remember, every single activity which we do as a service to the Lord the Lord doesn't forget it. And along the way, it spiritualizes us. If the Lord so desires, right, it can just leapfrog our faith further and further, right? But, have that clear intention and tell the Lord that, I want to do it. I'm not there yet. Please help me. Right? Intention is very important.
Yes, just now you explained about we shouldn't be artificially controlling. Like, say, suppose we wake up little late and we feel so hungry, but just for the sake of doing aarti, we'll do aarti. Then, I mean, inside we feel like we are hungry. We are hungry. Let me just finish this aarti. It's not good, right?
No, that artificially controlling is negative activity. Krishna is saying you don't suppress it artificially. It's not going to work. Right? If I'm smoking and I tell myself, no, I'm not going to stop, I'm going to smoke from tomorrow onwards, that is artificially suppressing it. That's not the way, because the next day I will start smoking again. The way to do it is to engage in an activity which will give me a higher taste.
Okay, got it.
It's the other way around. Okay, thank you very much. I also need to rush. I need to.
Thank you so much. Jai Shri Krishna.
All right.
Thank you so much, Jai Shri Krishna.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I will send the recording over and also the slides. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Bye.
Thank you, Jai Shri Krishna.
Thank you.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Yes.